I seem to be having some iPad issues, so I guess we'll find out whether this takes or not. I was talking about the Deja-vu and Jamais-vu. When I was 15. The first incident was a Jamais-vu, and it lasted all day. I woke up in the morning. My father was working upstate at the time, and so I got myself up for school, but I realized that I didn't remember which school I went to. And I knew I was in the farmhouse in Lake City, but I didn't know whether I went to Cadillac School or Lake City School or where I was going. And I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know what my classes were. I didn't know anything. I knew I had to go. So I got dressed and, brushed my teeth, brushed my hair, looked around for school books, and didn't see any. So I'm guessing I had no homework that day. And I was way out in the country, so I figured somebody would pick me up, either a school bus or something would happen. And I went outside, and soon some headlights showed up in the driveway, and a car pulled in, and I went over to the car, and I recognized my old biology teacher, and so apparently I was riding to school with her, going to Cadillac, and I just kind of small talked with her. I didn't really know what to say. She dropped me off at Cadillac High School, and I didn't know where my locker was. I didn't know what my locker combination was. I didn't know what classes I had. Absolutely nothing. And so I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go to the office, and I'm going to say that my dad requested a sheet of paper detailing my locker number, combination, list of classes, what hours they were, etc. And then I had to find the office. I couldn't remember where that was, so I followed the little signs in the school. And I went to the office, and I told him, well, he wants his paper, and I don't know why, but, he needs to have it. So they gave me the paper, and I found my locker, and I got the appropriate books for what class it said that I had, first off. And I found the classroom, but school had already started, and I was feeling so weird, and I was so embarrassed that I was too scared to go into the classroom. And I went to the bathroom, and I just waited in there. And I ended up in there for about 3 hours, maybe longer. I decided, okay, this is ridiculous. I can't stay in the bathroom all day hiding. So I looked at the sheet of paper and found what class I was supposed to be in. And I went to the class, and nobody was there. And the door was locked, and the lights were off, and I was baffled. So I'm walking down the hall, and the principal accosts me, and I told him, I said, he's like, what are you doing in the hall and all this stuff? Don't you have a class? And I said, well, I'm supposed to be in this class, but I went there and nobody's there and the door's locked. And he said, that class, well, they're at lunch right now. And, they went, I think, in 2 different shifts or something, and lunches in the high school. And he looked at me like I'd lost my mind completely. I'm like, oh, okay, well, thank you. And I started to walk toward the cafeteria, which I knew was by the office. And I couldn't bring myself to go in. I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to sit. You know, I didn't know anything. And so I ended up back in the bathroom. And I stayed in the bathroom the entire day. I just couldn't handle, everything was just so surreal to me that I didn't know what to do. And after school, I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to meet because the biology teacher would give me the ride taught in the junior high. So I made an assumption that I was supposed to walk over there, and I did. And I got a ride back home with her, and the rest of the day was just gone. And then when I woke up the next day, everything was perfectly fine. So that was Deja-vu. Deja-vu was different. That started happening where, at first it would happen most often in the laundry room, and I would look at, there was a spider web in the window in the laundry room, and I would look at it, or at the washing machine, and I would have the deja-vu super strong, intense, where I'd be swimming. I'd just have to hang on to the washing machine, and then it would pass, and then I'd get this terrible headache. And I'd have them about maybe 3 times a week, and then it started happening several times a day. It would happen no matter what I looked at. It got to a point it happened, you know, I was in school, and at this point I was going to Lake City School, and it would happen at school, it would happen everywhere. It got to the point where I couldn't function. It was happening every 5 minutes, then it was happening all the time. And my head was just splitting in pain. It got to a point where I was afraid to open my eyes, and I would just lay there with my eyes closed. And then it started happening with my eyes closed. And my dad finally got very concerned, and he took me to the doctor, and they sent me in to have an EEG. But of course I didn't have one when I was hooked up to the EEG. And I came to find out many, many years later, after I found out I had the epilepsy, that back then, temporal lobe epilepsy often couldn't be picked up through an EEG. What they'd have to do is they would have to, you know, hook the electrodes directly to the cranium, which meant surgery. So I guess only 45% of people with TLE at that period could be picked up on a normal EEG. But after about 3 months, it went away, and I was fine again. So that was my experience with that. Then when I was in my 20s, the frequent out-of-body experiences started happening. And I might have been 19, actually, when they started happening. But they were very interesting. And my first experience, after the initial one, when I was about 12, I rose up through the ceiling, I rose up and I went through the door, and then I went out into the living room, and I'm floating, I'm not in my body, and I went through the door, and I was outside, and I could feel a breeze blowing through me. It was quite beautiful. And I flew up into the sky, and I looked down over the city. I was in Davison, Michigan, down by Flint at the time. And I could see, it wasn't a familiar city, and yet I could see everything from a perspective of being very, very high up in the sky, which, and that baffles me. If the experience isn't real, if it's a product of my mind, how did my mind put together a topical view of the city if I'd never seen it before? But that's what happened, and it was very accurate, very beautiful. And then all of a sudden I thought, how am I going to get back down? And as soon as I felt fear about getting back down, I just automatically started swooshing down. I went straight through the ceiling into my body. And I was awake when I entered my body. So that was the first one. And after that, when I was about 20, I had an intense period for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks where I couldn't stay in my body. I would just float right up while I was walking, and I'd be, several feet above my own head while my body's walking and I'm floating, and I'm seeing everything from a perspective, higher than what I am. And I had several of those, and it was kind of scary, because if I even thought about having an out-of-body experience, it would happen. And I started having some sleep paralysis at that time as well, which was terrifying. Just sleep paralysis is one of the worst things that you can experience, because you can't, you're awake, but you can't wake up. You can't open your eyes. You can't move your body. It's just a horrible thing to have to go through. So those are some of the things that happened at that point. And we're getting close to being time. I'm going to go into some other things, but this takes a while to upload, so I'm going to let you go now, and I will finish up in yet another video.